Hey, everyone. Thanks for doing this. First of all, you just finished up your second semester together as a full staff. Just how do you feel about where your efforts are in terms of building up this sports psychology department right now, and how have those efforts evolved in the past year?
Thanks for that question. This is Jamey Houle. So the program's definitely evolved over time. We've built it up to a big part of our program is, especially in the beginning, is introducing our staff around getting to know coaches, athletic trainers, medical staff, and really being out and about, not just in our offices doing therapy, but also doing preventative work, introduction talks to teams and that kind of stuff. So one of the things that's really changed over time is our access, the student athletes' access to us, and then also our visibility. So we were at many more practices this year. We were in team meetings. We were in meetings with called athletic performance team meetings that would have coaches, athletic trainers, nutritionists, student athlete support services. So we were the way it's really evolved for us to become highly integrated into the holistic treatment of the athlete. And so we've been really happy with that as we have evolved throughout the year.
You all have had a lot of, public support from, Ryan Day and Chris Holtmann and Gene Smith. They've all, talked about the importance of mental health, and I know they've been really supportive of what you all are doing. How closely, do you work with them on a daily basis, and how much does that help what you're doing when, the coaches, the athletic director are, such publicly supporting what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, we worked with them throughout the year. Something that really stands out to me and our staff is that at the beginning of the year, especially Coach Day was extremely welcoming to our staff, encouraging us to come to meals with the athletes and training camp, and really, coming in there on the sideline so we could be seen with the athletes and to be able to be visible like that. And that advocacy is unbelievable. It really opened doors for the athletes to see us as, regular folks that they could talk to, and Coach Day was integral in that, and Coach Holtmann we've worked closely with as well. And his, something that stands out to me is one of the press conferences he did where he was such a strong advocate and came out and, he even said, I go to therapy, and that it seems like such a small thing to say, but I had texted him right after that, and I told him I really appreciate that because he has such a large voice. And of course, Gene Smith's support has been tremendous. I mean, throughout this entire process, often asking us, what do we need? How can I be helpful? And so that has been an integral part to our success, is those three very large voices.
I know you were a student athlete yourself, Jamey. How much have you seen this conversation change and grow from when you were a student athlete to where it is now?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think a major way it's grown is I feel like, in my opinion, when I was an athlete, it was kind of like, if you have a problem, go see the sports psychologist. It was very much more like just like pathology focused versus like enhancement focused. Like trying to get the mental edge on your sport. And seeing, now it's evolved to the place where seeing therapy is just as if you sprain your ankle, you go see a doc. You might, if you have, if you've been feeling down and feeling anxious, you just go see the psychologist. It's become way more normal, if you will, to seek help from a sports psychologist or athletic counselor. So I think it's just gone from you got a problem, go see the sports psychologist, to, hey, you want to take your game to the next level? You should go talk to Sharon, or go talk to Candace, go talk to Chelsea. The integration has really changed.
And last one for me, but obviously, this has been an unusual couple months for you all in terms of dealing with this COVID-19 pandemic. What ways have you all had to adapt to ensure that student athletes are continuing to receive the mental health care they need?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've gone, I don't know if you want to say gone digital or gotten onto, these virtual platforms. And Candace, I'll ask you to kind of speak to this a little bit about our social media presence and website and stuff. We're developing that process now to be more of a kind of virtual presence versus the in-person presence. So obviously we're doing Zoom meetings, or we have our online charting system that we'll do our HIPAA compliant visits through, but we'll do individual meetings, coaches meetings, athlete meetings, team meetings, but then also the website and our social media presence we're trying to grow. Candace, you want to speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, sure. And to Jamey's point, in terms of us being able to be physically accessible to our athletes at practice as well as in athletic training rooms, in terms of our physical presence, we want to also be accessible to them in the palm of their hand. And so, and what that looks like is, of course, meeting them where they are, which is, providing content to push out through social media as well as our website. And so being a reference point beyond just who they physically see, when they're out and about. But given that we are now secluded to our homes and maximizing our opportunity to use the internet to the best of our ability, we are looking for ways to meet our student athletes where they are right now. And so over the coming months, we are strategically looking at what that looks like for us, and how to best capture what the student athletes need that they, like I said, can access at the click of the button outside of them doing the virtual visits with us via content through social media.
Thank you.
Next up, Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch, and Austin Ward will be on deck. Joey?
Well, thank you everyone for chatting with us this morning. Obviously, this is kind of a challenging time for just people generally. It's isolating and all that, but especially for athletes and players in their sports. They're used to being in a locker room around people. They're used to playing the sport. How difficult has this time been for players and athletes from a mental health perspective that you guys have been able to work with?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think in a lot of ways, especially in the beginning, it was really kind of a grief process. It was a loss. I mean, I can't tell you how many seniors had to go through this experience of, 4 years of building and winning championships and trying to win a championship their senior year, and then having that be gone in a day, in the middle of a practice even. And so I think that especially in the beginning, there was a lot of anger, a lot of sadness, grief. However, I have noticed that, y'all from our staff, please feel free to chime in. But I feel like I've noticed folks doing pretty okay in general. I mean, this generation especially has been very virtual in general. I mean, they've taken classes online, the majority of them, and they chat with each other on FaceTime and that kind of stuff. So in general, I feel like they've been doing really well. We're really trying to support the coaches as well. The coaches have had so much contact with the athletes, and then to have it be kind of taken and changed quickly has been difficult. So we've been trying to support the coaches as well. Chelsea, what are you seeing? Does that feel kind of similar to what you guys have been saying?
Yeah, I think it's been really cool to see how resilient these student athletes are. I think that we all see it throughout their seasons and in their athletic performances that these are resilient kids. We see them work on rehab and focus on getting back to the field or the court or the pool or whatever after injury. And this is something that no one could have predicted, no one could have anticipated. And so, they're dealing with all the same things the rest of us are, what we're seeing in our own lives and families and peers. they're dealing with it also. But it's been really amazing, again, to watch the resiliency, to see them connect and build each other up, to engage with us in new and interesting ways. And so while, of course, they're not without issue or challenges or struggles, I think this has really shown a light that they are resilient.
Next up, Austin Ward from Lettermen Row with Lori Schmidt on deck. Austin?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for doing this. Jamey, for those of us who are just, looking at this from the outside or have never done anything like it or been involved at sports at this high level, I know you can't speak to a normal, meeting or consultation look like. What do you hope to get out of it? What would it, look like for a player that wants to come in and get some help?
Yeah, I mean, I think we start with what's going on in their life and how they want to enhance their life. Like, I often begin my sessions with athletes by asking them, what's most on your mind? Because I think they got a lot on their mind. So it's my style in general tends to be very led by the athlete, by the student athlete, and so it's kind of conversational in nature. And being able to highlight patterns that we see kind of going on, stressors that they're going on. And then I always want them to leave with something tangible that they can do, that they can do to try to feel like they can address what's going on for them, whether that's mindfulness or some type of journaling or talking with their friends or something like that. So it's kind of a process of understanding as much as possible what's going on for them and then trying to have them leave with tools to be able to live a better, fuller life.
And you referenced the support from Gene and Coach Day and Holtmann. How is that translated? Are you seeing much more use from the players than you guys expected? Is it becoming? Are you guys much busier than you would have used to be? How much work is there now for you guys, and how much more open are players to using these services than they might have been a few years ago?
Yeah, I guess my bias is that we've always been super busy, but I think now, we went from 1.5 people to 4 people, and now instead of 1.5 people being full, 4 people are full. And so I think it's an interesting kind of public health perspective, which is like the more you're out there, more visible you are, more you normalize the experience, the more people will come see you. Right? It's kind of the opposite of, like, in some ways, medicine, where it's like, you treat the leg and then the leg's better and then they may or may not come back. The more we're visible, the more folks will come and see us. And so we have definitely seen an increase in numbers, and that doesn't mean necessarily that more folks are having struggles. It just means that we're more visible and more accessible. And so I think it definitely has worked. I mean, we get lots of referrals that will come from, we'll do a team talk and they'll go, that was great. Do you have any time to meet like this week or next week? And because we have more people, we can get people in faster. And that is a huge benefit to having 4 people, which is people are getting in to see us pretty quickly. And that's kind of different from around the country because of our staff being larger.
Thank you.
Next up, Lori Schmidt from USA Today Buckeye Wire with Rob Aller on deck. Lori?
Hi, guys. You talked about an increase in numbers, Jamey. Do you have numbers per se? Do you know roughly what percentage of the athletes are willing to come to you and talk?
Yeah, I would say if I had to give a rough estimate, I would say we're between 20 and 25% of the student-athlete population is coming in. So given the fact that we have around 1,000 athletes, so that would put us in and around 200 to 250 different athletes coming in. And that's about on par with where folks are in the country. And then also, when you see university counseling centers and that kind of stuff, they're in and around 20, 25, 30% of the student population. So we're in and around that area.
And, if I hurt my leg or something, the coach would send me to a trainer. Do coaches send players to you, or does the athlete have to want to seek you guys out? Can someone be referred to you, or do they have to sort of take initiative on their own?
It kind of goes both. It goes both ways, But I think at Ohio State, a huge emphasis from our head team physician is that they talk to the athletic trainer as if the athletic trainer is quote unquote the hub of the wheel, meaning all information comes in and out through the athletic trainer. So if we talk to the student athletes, like if you have a concern, you can always reach out to us directly, or you can go to your athletic trainer, and we have a great relationship with athletic trainers. So the athletic trainer will say, call us, call Sharon or somebody and say, hey, heads up, this person's interested in services. We were chatting the other day in the training room, like I think this person's wanting to come in. And so the referral will come through the athletic trainer, or sometimes they'll come from coaches, and we often say, hey, let your athletic trainer know, and then so the athletic trainer is always in the loop. But we get referrals from all sources.
I know you can't address specific athletes, but I know that Chris Holtmann had a player who went through a very noteworthy situation this past season. You mentioned the comments he made in the press conference. Do you feel like what he went through with DJ Carton might have given him a greater appreciation? Do you feel like his appreciation for the importance of mental health was always there? Can you discuss a little more about what Chris Holtmann's relationship with your department has been like?
Yeah, I think his appreciation has always been there. It's always been on the forefront, and we've been in meetings before with athletic trainers and that kind of stuff where he's made it clear that this is. He really cares about the whole student. So academics, mental health. So it didn't surprise me that he said that at the press conference at all. I just wanted to express my appreciation for it because of his voice. But I think Gene Smith it begins at the top, and his support has really resonated throughout the entire athletic department with all coaches, and so I think everybody gets the understanding of how important mental health is, and so he's very supportive in that way.
And then my last question, Austin kind of got into it a little bit, asking you about the nuts and bolts of what you do. How much of your time is spent in one-on-one meetings with the athletes? How much of it is designed around team presentations, the social media aspect of things that you had to work up? Could you break down what you guys actually do a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I would say we kind of, of course it's always fluid, but I would say, when we created this program, especially the athletic counselors, so Sharon and Candace, we wanted more time to be spent outside of the office than it was previously designed at. So I would say it's almost a 50-50 split. So about 50% of the time is spent clinical, and about 50% of the time is spent outside of the office, consulting, in the training room, and that kind of stuff. So if you want to put it at hours, it would be like 20, 25-ish kind of in the office, and then the rest of the time outside of the office. So a real big push when we hired 3 new people was we got to be visible, we got to be accessible, and it's harder to do that if you're in your office seeing 8 people in a row. So I would say about 50-50 split. And then the social media part, that's a newer project, but we're trying to build that up, and that's kind of built into that 50% of the time that's outside of the direct clinical hours.
Thank you guys so much for doing this call. Yeah, it does. And thanks for doing this, and thanks for what you do for the athletes.
No, thank you. Thank you for hearing us.
Next up, Rob Aller from the Columbus Dispatch with Doug Lesmerises on deck. Rob?
Thanks for doing this. First, a big picture question. There's such a proliferation nationally on campuses with counseling. It's sort of ballooned in a good way. Just wondered, do you think that's because there's increased pressure on student athletes or just students in general? Is it increased acceptance? You kind of already answered this maybe, increased acceptance, less stigma involved with counseling, and then also increased availability. And maybe it's all three of those, if you could speak to that, increased pressure on students, acceptance, counseling, and availability.
Yeah, I mean, I think the increased pressure is real. I think if we look at, for example, social media, their lives are constantly hooked in, constantly on view for everybody, for many, many people. I think about our student athletes. If they have a bad game or maybe even have a good game, they have folks that they don't even know that are commenting on them, and they might even make personal jabs at them, and they don't even know these folks. And I think it just 20 years ago didn't kind of happen. So I think the social media part, but the pressure is just about to do well academically. Ohio State is a great institution, and so people are really, they're high standards here. And so I think the pressure to perform well, get scholarships, with the increase in pricing of school, there's a lot of financial pressure that can be on there as well. So I think that's some of the pressures that they're going on. But also more and more folks, because of medicine and being able to access counseling services earlier in their life, like high school, more students are able to get to college. And so that may not 20 years ago have been able to do that, or 30 years ago. And so you're getting more people that are coming to college on medicine or have been in therapy, and then they want to access those services when they get to campus. So this is where we see our increase in numbers on campus, and so that's met with more support. So there's people who are there's less stigma about it because maybe they were already in therapy, and then they come to campus, and because we're such a big campus, I'm thinking about Dr. Drake's push to hire new therapists. There's something like 16 new therapists were hired at the counseling center about 2 or 3 years ago. There's more access and more talk about it. And counseling center here, for example, does a great job, and we're working to do this as well, to break the stigma. And when we do that, we'll have more folks come in. I think I hit the 3 on there. Is that right?
Yeah, thank you. My second question is, I know you can't get into specifics, but what is the main theme, and we can talk overall, all student athletes and then football players specifically. Is there a main theme that they come in? Maybe it's that pressure you talked about, maybe it's social media, but if there's, in terms of performance related and maybe on, again, football, what would you tackle most, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, so if we look at the broad picture, adjustment is a big thing that we see in college counseling and in the college environment. And so football players are not immune from that. If I'm a freshman that came in from a high school where I, fill in the stat, I threw for 50 touchdowns but then I come in and I'm like I'm the low guy on the totem pole, for example, because of just experience, that can be a hard adjustment. That's a very difficult adjustment, especially, say, I'm even from a small town and everybody knows me and I get all this lore and all this kind of stuff, and then I come in and, there's folks that have been here for 4 years that are in front of me. That adjustment can be hard, and they're not immune from that. So that can be adjustment. We also have seen rise in anxiety and mood issues like depression. And so because people are more able to talk about it and we're more accessible, we hear more about that. They might not call it anxiety, but nerves or difficulty sleeping or changes in appetite, so those are some of the things we're seeing.
Thank you.
All right, next up is Doug Lesmerises from Cleveland.com with Tim May on deck. Doug?
How would you describe the balance of the athletes you see? How many of them are dealing more with performance issues? I want to just be better at my sport. I want to visualize things versus the mental health aspect of maybe there are things the things you just mentioned, sort of out of the sports that I'm feeling as a person? What's the balance of performance help versus general mental health assistance?
It's a great question, and Chelsea, I might ask you to chime in a little about this too, about the performance stuff as well. But just I think I think a lot of I would say it leans more towards the mental health side, because I think in a lot of ways we were conceptualized that way historically as sports psychologists at Ohio State. But so we get a lot of the more mental health side. But I mean, I think it's hard with the chicken or the egg sometimes. It's like, is my performance leading me to have a better mood, lower mood, or is my mood affecting my performance? So they're very, very intertwined. But it's what I will say is it's not super common to have somebody come in and only say, listen, I just have difficulty with my curveball. That's it. Like, that's the only thing that's going on. So I think it bleeds into other areas. But I don't know, Chelsea, do you have other thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think another consideration is that we're doing, big things in the college arena nationwide in terms of reducing stigma, and you see that in our data and the things we've already talked about today. But it still exists. The stigma is still there, and we're working really hard, and it's a work in progress. I think one phenomenal thing about the fact that we all are trained to be able to provide performance enhancement services is that, like Jamey said, improving performance can improve mental health, improving mental health can improve performance, but it's also a really great way to get people into our offices that doesn't necessarily have to feel like you're going to go lay on the couch and talk about your mother, with the shrink. It allows for, okay, there's a lot of things going on here, and if talking about performance is our in, it also allows us to uncover things that kids maybe haven't felt comfortable opening up about, or they just haven't been in that space yet. And so I think that, for all of us, we're just such complex beings that it is all intertwined and it's all interconnected. But the performance domain is a really great way to build relationships with these kids. There is, that piece of us being the professionals behind the closed door, and even when they see us at practice, we start becoming more of a person. But when we're really starting to show that we're invested in your performance as well, we want you to succeed, we want you to improve. That's a really great foundational relational aspect to help them open up and maybe identify some areas in other parts of their life where we can be helpful. So I think that it is all so complex and intermixed, but both of those sides of the coin work really well together in terms of building relationships to help create transformative experiences for these kids.
What I'll also add to that real quick is that, like, when I took this job, one of the things I said in my interview is that, and I had spoken with a colleague about this, is that mental health is performance enhancement. I mean, like that is the performance enhancement part. And so it's hard to change, pull those two things apart.
You mentioned early on just the increase in mental health awareness for all college students. Is this just do you just happen to work with this subset of the student body, that you are athletic department employees and so you work with student athletes, or and that the challenges for other students are basically the same kind of things? Or how different do you feel is it working with athletes as opposed to college students who also have similar mental health issues who aren't athletes? Is your job very different, or would it be similar if you were dealing with the general student population?
That's a great question. I mean, from our training, and we know that the student athlete population is a unique population. It's a culture, and it's very important as clinicians, and this is why we chose Sharon, Candace, and Chelsea, that folks understand and get that culture of student athlete and the uniqueness of the pressures that they're under, to be able to perform at high levels both on and off the field, and have all of these requirements of them that surround them at all times, meetings and study hall and athletic training, they're going to class with ice on their shoulder. It's like, when I was an athlete, I remember I had an ankle injury, and I walked into my class with ice on my ankle, and a student asked me if I was in a car accident. And I said, no, I just came from a Tuesday practice, So I think trying to understand that this is a unique population is vital for the clinicians to be able to have buy-in from the athletes, to really understand that they get their culture. That being said, there's obviously common factors of this developmental period. So adjustment and identity issues and that kind of stuff that are present for the majority of this developmental period, 18 to 22 or whatever. But in general, this is a very unique population with unique demands, pressures, and mental health concerns.
Last one from me. What you're describing, I think all of us on this call understand to some degree the demands of being an athlete and a college student at the same time. And you were describing just, all what you have to do for class, what you have to do for practice, for weight training, for studying film. It's almost like having two jobs at the same time. When you have a situation like that, you can either have things like this, where you have people who help the athletes through this, or maybe you could change the structure. Is there any part of you, as you guys help athletes navigate this demanding life, do you ever think to yourself, the demands are too much? Yes, we're here to help them, but maybe there would be another way to help them. The average life of an athlete in this modern world, is it set up the right way? Or from a psychological standpoint, do you ever wonder to yourself, man, this is just too much pressure and too much for an average kid? We have to change the structure.
Wow, that's a great question. I think they are under a lot of pressure. I mean, the way I had conceptualized it is life after college is going to have many, many, many demands. And so I had always kind of conceptualized it as being a student athlete is really preparing them very well to handle all the multiple different things that happen after college, and all the different roles, identities, jobs, that kind of stuff that you're going to have to handle. So I always had seen it as a preparation for life after college. How the athletes going from, in my experience, for example, athletes going from this thing to this thing, like practice to class to practice again to study table, that kind of thing. That mapped on for me, for example, like very well into graduate school, because I would go from teaching to counseling to coaching and then do my own homework, and that didn't feel very different from being an athlete. But I wonder how many folks, like, they graduate college and then having all these life demands outside when they graduate, it makes it a little more difficult, and the athletes are already prepped to handle that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Great. This is Jerry, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and transition the call now, because we've been joined by a couple special guests. Coach Ryan Day has joined the call, and also Coach Chris Holtmann, I believe, has also joined the call. And so what I'd like to do, just to make this the best use of time, I'm going to go down the list. I've got two more individuals to call on, and then I'll go down the list one more time. And if each of us could just have one question for either Jamey or his staff, or for Coach Day or Coach Holtmann, we'll be able to get through everyone. With that, again, welcome to the call, coaches. Thank you so much. We'll turn the questions over to Tim May from Lettermen Row, with Adam Jardy on deck. Tim?
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, it means I can ask Ryan Day a question. Jerry?
Right here, yes, please.
Oh, there you go. Hey, Ryan, what? I don't know. I don't know if anybody likes to brag about things like this, but what does it mean to you to see just the more increased awareness of of mental stability for young athletes, et cetera, like just kind of taking off right now. What does that mean to you? Does it mean you're kind of making carving a niche out there to a certain extent?
Well, I think that it's something that is gaining more and more awareness, and I have a very, very small part in that, but I think we all have a responsibility to make sure that people understand that part of being healthy is being mentally healthy. And the thing that, I would just say is that, everyone has physical health and everybody has mental health. And sometimes when you hear the term mental health, people take pause. Well, it's just like, eating well and putting good food into your body and working out physically, having a strong and healthy mind is critically important. And I think it's becoming harder and harder. I think it's two things. I think it's becoming harder and harder for this younger generation with all the different things that come with this, with the social media and demands. And, they're always on the move, which is very interesting that we're having this conversation during quarantine, because I think it's offering us a little bit of perspective. But the other part is that there's been a stigma attached to looking towards getting help mentally for whatever that reason was over time. And so I think both of those reasons are great reasons why we're bringing a lot of attention to this. And, I'm proud to say I think Ohio State's, in the forefront of this nationally and certainly, in athletics.
Yeah, and for Jamey or Chelsea, is there a unique sort of problem that you encounter with football players in particular? I mean, major college football players at Ohio State, which are in the spotlight, who so much rides on them making a catch or making a good throw or making a tackle. I mean, have you found there's something unique about football above other sports?
I guess what I would say is I don't know if it's so unique about football, but Ohio State football, the amount of people who have eyes on them and who follow them and are interested in what they're doing. And yeah, like you said, how many catches do they have? How many touches? How many yards? All this kind of stuff. It really is. It makes it hard to just have folks just be. They have, and just walk around, because they're going to have people come up to them, and they're going to have people who, if I'm eating dinner and somebody comes up to me and wants my autograph or says hi or something like that, there's multiple options, obviously. But if I say, no, listen, I'm with this person, they're very important, I need to eat my dinner, then I'm seen as a jerk, right? But if I also turn to this person and spend a good time with this fan or whatever, I might be ignoring the person I'm with that I really care about. So I feel like that's kind of a unique, just because of the high level of Ohio State football that I've seen here. But Chelsea, what are your thoughts about that?
I think that football is a unique culture in a lot of different ways. I think that, football is one of the sports where some of our kids do go pro. It's a huge team. There's such a variety in terms of socioeconomic and familial backgrounds that I think that while we're seeing more and more visible, professional athletes come out and talk about mental health, we're starting to see the trickle-down effect. But I do think that there has been a huge culture difference than maybe some of our other sports that have been smaller, with smaller team sizes and the ability to kind of infiltrate some of those. And so I think that there are some differences, but, my experience has been that once we start doing that work to decrease stigma, to build relationships, to connect, that it changes, and it changes fast. That I think something else really cool about football as a sport is that, once we start reducing stigma, they start talking to each other and they start normalizing it from within. And we're lucky enough to see it from the top down with Coach Day that, we're normalizing a lot of this stuff. So I do think that football culture has historically and traditionally been a little bit different and a little bit harder to infiltrate with mental health promotion. But I do think we're seeing that change. And I think it's a really exciting time to see that, especially as, football as a sport in the United States has often been a big space for changing the culture of our whole society. And so it's, I think it's really empowering to see that, yes, it has been a little bit different, but as we see this stigma reduce and with the platform that our kids have in particular, I really think we're going to start seeing more and more of a welcoming environment for this, culture shift in such a masculine sport.
Chelsea, I don't want to follow up real quick, though. Like you just touched on it. When you have a head coach who doesn't just okay it, but embraces sort of what this is all about, I don't know if you probably have a pretty good bit of experience on this, but how much has it changed, sort of the green light aspect of guys seeking out that help? In other words, players, when they know their head coach isn't holding it against them, so to speak.
I think it's a total game changer. I think that when they don't have to fear that a coach is going to judge them, or that a coach is going to think that they're weak or isn't going to lose trust in them, and that they can, open up about, things that are going on in their life, because they're either 18 to 22-year-old young men who have lives outside of sport and families. And so I think that with that coach support, it makes our lives a lot easier as the clinicians. And I really do think that it changes the whole trajectory for these kids' lives when you have a coach who's so supportive and so open, both from a help-seeking now perspective, but I think it changes their lives for the rest of their lives in terms of help-seeking and opening up. So it's a huge blessing to have a coach in place who really does support this from core. It's not lip service.
Hey, thank you.
Okay, next up is Adam Jardy from the Columbus Dispatch. Adam?
Thanks, Jerry. This first question for Jamey. When you have a coach like when Chris Holtmann during the season, he very openly he used the phrase antiquated thinking and calling people out for if they're critical of kids going through this. He's dismissed it as antiquated thinking. How do you see that have a ripple effect, not just with the student athletes that you're dealing with, but just kind of in society in general? How does that impact what you guys do, and how does a statement like that affect you guys?
Well, I think, it just shows, it can show support for the fact that, what's really important. What are we trying to do here? How are we trying to help the student athletes? And again, not to sound like not to hit this too much, but I mean, the power of Coach Holtmann's voice, Coach Day, Gene Smith, it goes so far. I mean, it shows they're just seen as such leaders in the community in Ohio and nationally. So to have somebody come out and go, listen, let's really focus on what's important here, which is the mental health of the student athlete or the health of the student athlete. It goes really far. I mean, I think many people watch our coaches and listen, especially in high school, the folks that are coming in, and how is this person going to welcome me? And it just paves the way for, this is what our program is about. We're about holistic treatment of the athlete, not just seen as a basketball player or a football player. So to use Chelsea's word, it's a game changer. I think it's really it's tremendous.
Thank you. And then the follow-up for Chris. Are you on, Coach Holtmann?
I am.
Okay. When you had that press conference and you used that phrase, I wonder what got you to that point where you used the phrase antiquated thinking. It really stuck with me then. It sticks with me now. What got you to that point of understanding what antiquated thinking was and kind of where we are now? And how did you feel that make an impact?
Yeah, good question. I just, I think more than anything, and I do think we're in an environment here that's been created by Gene. Obviously, Ryan has spearheaded this, where I think all of us are really taking a much greater look at how mental health has impacted student athletes. And I'm sure Ryan's seen it, and we've talked about it. We've had more students come through my office and ask for help in the last 5 years than in the previous 15 years I was in coaching. And I think there are a lot of factors for that. I think when I said that, I think my point was, just to support DJ in the fact that there's there's nothing wrong with a young man stepping away in a moment where he needs help. There's certainly nothing wrong with a young man requesting that. That was a decision we came to along with his family, and it was very much the right decision for him. And there were really no other underlying reasons for that outside of he needed some time to address his mental health, and that was it. And to question anything, and by and large, he had unbelievable support by our Buckeye community and fans, unbelievable support. But I think anyone who would question a young man doing that is it was wrong, and the thinking certainly I think has changed for the better in the last hopefully 5 to 8 years.
And then one addition to that, with the fact that OSU has obviously increased its staffing and things like that, how have you as a staff been able to take advantage of that? The fact that you went through some of these issues publicly last year, did the fact that there was more staffing and more support at Ohio State help you navigate that better?
Absolutely, yeah. We have an unbelievable staff, and they're very visible. And I think that's the difference for us maybe than in previous years, Adam, is there is a greater visibility and interaction with our athletes, certainly different for me in a really positive way. And I think sometimes as coaches, probably 15 years ago, maybe I'd have been reluctant to bring down mental health professionals into our locker room and around our environment. And, I think I had to change my thinking, 8 to 10 years ago. And now they are much more visible. We have an unbelievable staff, and they're comprehensive in their approach. And, we have a number of athletes that I don't even know about that have been touched throughout the year by our mental health staff. So I think it's a tremendous asset to have for the whole person development for our athletes.
Thank you.
Am I being heard right now?
Yes.
For now.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Dan Hope, are you there?
I am here.
Okay. You can. I'm sorry. I think I messed with my mute. One question, please, for one of our panelists.
Yeah, just for Coach Day and Holtmann, just how have you seen this conversation around mental health evolve back from when you were a student athlete to where it is right now?
Ryan, you want to start on that?
Oh, okay. You can go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I think it's been 180, Dan. I think it's been 180 from when I played. I think there very much was a stigma about it when I played and early in my coaching career. And I think so many issues, that involved mental health, you just kind of gritted your teeth and got through it. And sometimes, oftentimes that wasn't the best approach. And I think we've seen a dramatic shift. And listen, let's be honest. The reality is that it's been complicated here by social media. we've seen a dramatic shift for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with Chris and everything that he said. I do think. Are you guys getting some feedback on there, Jerry? Jerry, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I'm sorry that there's no more feedback. I fixed my issue.
Okay. Yeah, no, I would agree with everything Chris said. I think it's become something that we've started to talk about more. And the other part of it is it's still a work in progress as coaches, as players, and we're still trying to figure this part of it out. And nothing's perfect. But I think the idea is that we're constantly talking about it. It's there, and we're trying to figure out, the different manifestations of mental health, and as coaches, how do we provide help, and how do we provide an environment where it's okay to talk about it, knowing that it's a very complicated issue at times, because there's a lot of things at play, especially, as a lot of people talked about in this call today, the amount of stress that's involved, the amount of pressure that people feel from their families at home. When you just look at youth sports today, you see that there's a lot of pressure put on these kids at a young age, and I think there's a fear of failure, there's a fear of letting people down back home, and along the way, figuring out what type of different issues that people are dealing with is this process that we're engaged in right now, that we're still trying to figure out and navigate through, and it's not easy. I'm just telling you, it's not easy, but we're working at it. And we're trying to get better at it every day.
Thanks, guys.
Next up for one question, Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch. Joey?
This can be a question, I guess, for either of the coaches, but during this pandemic, social isolating time, how much more have you encouraged your players to use the mental health resources available to them, and how much more has that been a conversation just in meetings with your players and staffs?
You can grab that, Ryan, if you like.
Yeah. So I think one of the keys to this whole thing is not jamming it down the kids' throats, and letting them come to us, and letting them come to our athletic counselors and sports psychologists. I think when you force the action, it's certainly not as effective. So we had a team meeting 3 weeks ago now, where Candace came on and spoke to our team, and gave them some tips and some different resources that are available. There has been some other resources available through Ohio State Athletics, where people are getting together twice a week, and so we're just putting that stuff out there and talking about it. I'll mention something here and there on a team meeting through Zoom. But there's a fine line there, and I think if you push too hard, 18, 19, 20-year-olds tend to push back a little bit. So, we're trying to give them different thoughts and ideas and tips, and also the resources, and then kind of working through it from there.
Thanks, Ryan.
Up next, Austin Ward, Lettermen Row, with one question. Austin?
Hey, Ryan, your sport has always been, famous for this, mental toughness, and obviously the days of the Junction Boys and all that are gone, but it's always been the hallmark of football is, to be so mentally strong and tough. How does this, that idea mesh with the mental wellness and, just the idea of mental health and football doesn't always seem to go together? How is that changing? How are you breaking through that way?
I mean, I kind of look at it as two different things, because it's like saying, are you physically tough or are you physically healthy? They kind of go, they're two different conversations. And I think that you have to be tough to play this game. There's no question you have to be tough. And but I think Jamey mentioned this before. If your mind's not in a great place, boy, it's hard to be tough. But the old thought process of just get through it, or if you're going through a tough time, or when you get off the field and you're at home and you want to reflect on why you're feeling a certain way, it's okay. That's a healthy thing. That's part of recovery. That's part of staying healthy. And I think, they're two different things. But in terms of being mentally tough and staying mentally tough, I mean, it's still a huge part of what we have to do in all sports. And trying to help find that balance is critical. But just dismissing feelings, when people are off the field, or just saying that, they need to get tougher when they're talking about issues that they might be dealing with, that's a different part. That's a different process. That's a whole different deal. And so I think they're very different, but at the same time they're connected.
And last two questions. First one comes from Rob Aller from the Columbus Dispatch. Rob?
Yeah, for both of you guys, Ryan talked about the different kinds of pressures, but if you had to pinpoint one thing, you guys are on the front lines, you have to pinpoint one thing, whether it's social media or just expectations to perform greater than they used to be because of all the social media, what would it be? What do you see that is affecting your guys maybe more than anything? And I know there's dozens of them, but if you had to boil it down.
You can start, Chris. Go ahead.
Yeah, Rob, I think if you were to ask me what has brought more of these issues maybe to the surface and maybe brought about more issues, whether it's anxiety or depression or a variety of things. If you're asking me, is there one issue? For me, it is the influence of social media. I think it's just the amount of hours that our athletes are influenced by social media is greater than any other information influence in their life right now. It's what they're feeding on consistently. And then I think when when you're in a high profile position, I think people in general, whether they're in a high profile position or not, struggle with the idea of comparison and social media, but it certainly gets accelerated when you're in a high profile performance position, like a lot of our athletes.
Ryan?
Yeah, I agree with everything Chris said. It totally is. It's a combination of a lot of things, but I would say the social media part is something that our guys cannot get away from, and the constant pressure to uphold their image and status is something that is very hard on them, and it's very, very important to them, even though we can tell them a million times till we're blue in the face that it doesn't matter. It does to them, and that's what's going on with this generation, and so that makes it very, very hard. But there's also the other parts of it. I do think that youth sports is very different than when we grew up, and I think that the pressure that's put on. I mean, if you go to any youth game and you just see the pressure that parents put on kids to do well at a young age I see it with my kids, and I just feel like growing up, we used to just play in the yard and pick teams, and if it was a foul, we used to fight about it, and then we'd figure it out. We'd go play the next snap, or we'd do a redo. That doesn't happen anymore. There's just, it's a very different environment, and I think it's it's created for more stress for these kids and anxiety, and we're not going to change it. But we have to embrace it and figure out ways to help them.
Thanks.
And final question goes to Doug Lesmerises from Cleveland.com. Doug?
Ryan, I think we heard this some with the NFL draft afterward. You sort of heard NFL GM say, hey, we couldn't do as much work before the draft as we normally did, but everything still turned out okay. Maybe we were all driving ourselves nuts and, working 18-hour days, and we don't have to do that. Is there anything about the structure of college football that during this time, when your time is limited, right, you can't be with them as much? We know there are NCAA limits on how many hours you can spend with them anyway, but there's just so many demands on them as students and then as players. Are you learning anything from this that could be lessened in the future at all? We know how much time and stress they have. Is there anything within the structure that you as a coach could control that could help ease the stress on athletes? Do we ask too much of them year-round watching film, working out, going to practice, having basically 2 full-time jobs. Is there any way to lessen that, or is this just the way it has to work if you want to succeed?
Well, I think that the NFL is different than college in that, they're men who have, they have a family, they have a house to go to, they have the means to stay in shape and eat and work out, and they have a body of work in terms of understanding football. Where in college, it's the challenge is that a lot of them don't have a body of work of football. They don't quite know the level of football they need to be really successful at this level. Their bodies haven't developed yet enough, and they also need the structure of just having the motivation and discipline that the coaches help with. And so, do I think it's a lot? Sometimes I do, but I also think the kids really enjoy the structure. I think that this time has obviously given us a chance to all sit back and have some perspective on just everything. It makes you think through everything. But I think if you asked our players in the way that this generation's brought up, they like the structure and they like the constant feedback. I think probably the thing that they're struggling the most with right now is not having that structure and not having that constant feedback with the coaches. And so I don't think that part is an issue. But I will say at the same time that, sometimes maybe we overthink it as coaches and, maybe, we could do a little bit less. But again, we're dealing with 18, 19, 20-year-olds, not, 35 or not 25-year-old men in the NFL.
Coach Day, Coach Holtmann, thank you so much for taking the time to jump on this call with us. If either of you have anything more you'd like to say that we didn't get to, I'll give you that opportunity right now.
I was just going to say quickly, Jerry, that I really appreciate what the Big Ten is doing, and Kevin Warren obviously is making this a priority, and the work that the conference is doing right now to bring attention to mental health, especially during this time, should be applauded. And I want to make sure that our program and Ohio State thanks them publicly for everything they're doing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would echo that. I think it's a tremendous initiative, and I'm glad our conference is leading the way.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, again for both of you. And I also want to thank Candace Williams, Sharon Sumler, Chelsea Day, and Jamey Houle for being on this call, leading this very important conversation. I'll leave it up to the four of you, Jamey, if you or anyone, Sharon, Candace, or Chelsea, have any final comments that you want to make to our assembled media, feel free to do so right now.
Yeah, I would like to thank you all for coming out, talking with us. I think your all's voice as well about the narrative about mental health and the importance of it. People read what you do, and so that narrative is very important to us as well. And we really appreciate your ability to spread the good word about what we're doing. So it goes beyond just the one-on-one work we're doing, but goes to lots of folks that we wouldn't be able to reach. So we really appreciate all that you guys do.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe below to get the latest videos from Lettermen Row.
We got Letterman Live, we've got the practice report, we got rapid reaction. Hey, and we got Buckeye IQ with Zach Bourne.
For sure. We got recruiting breakdowns with Berm. We got whatever you need. Ohio State football and Ohio State athletics, we've got you covered here at Lettermen Row.